So hi, I'm Rami Khalil from Socialist Alternative, and I'll be introducing the speakers at this press conference today. Our two speakers are the candidate, Kshama Sawant, and also a longtime local activist and media figure, Jav Parrish. And after the two speakers, we can take any questions or interviews from the media. So just to introduce our first speaker, Kshama Sawant. She is an Occupy-inspired socialist alternative candidate who received nearly 30% of the vote last year, running against the Washington State Speaker of the House, Frank Chop. And her campaign last year was the first time she ever ran for office, and she received the highest vote for a socialist in Seattle in decades. It was also the highest vote for any independent left-wing candidate in the entire country last year. It was also the strongest challenge that the Washington State Speaker of the House, Frank Chop, had ever received in his entire term in office. She was also endorsed by the Strange newspaper, Communication Workers of America, Local 37083, also Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 587 during the primary election, and Pastor Rich Lang of the University Temple United Methodist Church, among many others. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Kshama Sawant.
Thank you, Rami. And I want to start by thanking everyone for being here, all our supporters. I want the press to know that most of the people you see here are people who volunteered in a very dedicated manner to our campaign last year. I also want to thank members of the press for making time to be here. We really appreciate it. And as Rami said, we are running this campaign in the background of our historic victory last year. And I know that in the mainstream media, a victory in an election campaign is always measured by whether you actually get to occupy the seat. But I will tell you, as an activist, that we measure our success by how much we were able to shift the debate in the mainstream media, in what is actually talked about. If you compare the debate that Obama and Romney had, this sham, ridiculous pretense of a debate, to what we actually did here in the city of Seattle in the 43rd district, that was in fact the only real debate that ordinary working people could see, where their interests were put on the table, where things that affect them were talked about, where the question of taxing the billionaires and the capitalist class was talked about. And what we did was we shifted the conversation from these canned statements that these corporate politicians make to a real activist dialogue. And we represented ordinary working people, students, people of color, women, the elderly, the disabled, and so on. And we will be doing that again. We will be shifting the political debate in the city to the left and using every inch of our space that we get to support social movements and mass movements. This year we will be running against Richard Conlin, who's a 16-year incumbent to the city council. And he is one among a long line of city council members who have basically furthered the agenda of big business and corporations and the super wealthy. He is particularly known for being the only council member who voted against the paid sick leave initiative, which was an absolutely necessary thing and which was supported hugely by rank and file workers. He also shifted, he also sort of got the monorail out of the popular agenda. There was a popular support for that. And more than anything else, I think we should mention that this whole city council, is populated by members who make nearly or even over $120,000 per year. Now you tell me, how can these people, in any honesty, represent ordinary working people while they are making such huge paychecks? And I pledge as a candidate to the city council that if I was elected a city council member, I will take home no more than the average worker's wage in Seattle, and the rest we will collectively put into building mass movements. All the rest of the money will be used to build mass movements. Tell me, when was the last time you heard this from somebody running for city council? But it should also be pointed out that Conlin is not an exception to the rule. He is the rule. The mayor's office and the city council are both controlled by the Democratic Party establishment, and indeed the city itself is controlled by the elite of the Democratic Party, who in turn are in the pockets of the Downtown Business Association, the construction industry, and particularly Paul Allen's Vulcan, which is devouring real estate in this city while the rest of us are struggling with skyrocketing rents. And these politicians on the city council are practiced in the vile art of speaking somewhat progressive rhetoric while carrying out policies that benefit big business and the billionaires and the millionaires. And our campaign this year is going to be, in this political space, the only advocate for ordinary working people who are routinely shut out of the political dialogue in the city. The rich are getting richer, while the rest of us face skyrocketing rents. We're facing high taxes, while big business is paying historically low taxes, and we're facing low wages and an overall rising cost of living. Our campaign will be calling for increasing the city's minimum wage to $15 an hour, and I say this is long overdue, so high time, let's fight for this together. And we will also be speaking out against the police brutality that happens in this city. And in fact, I need hardly remind those of you here that the SPD has a long, infamous history of brutality and repression, not only against people of color and poor people, but also a long history of repression against social movements, right from Black Panthers down to the WTO protesters and down to recently to the Occupy movement. We're calling for citizens elected, democratically elected oversight committee to be set up that will have full powers over the SPD, and that the SPD should be answerable to ordinary people, not to the mayor's office that is controlled by the elite in this city. And we are also going to be campaigning in a very, very loud manner against the coal terminal. You can see some of our signs here. Our campaign wants to help. We want to help a mass movement rise up that will put the brakes on the coal trains. We want to make sure that the coal trains that the corporations want to push don't see the light of day. And I know that the City Council has a rhetoric against the coal trains, but the reality is that simply having an empty rhetoric is not going to stop these corporations from doing it. We need the City Council to put forward serious measures against the coal trains. We need mass occupations, we need mass blockades, and we need them to carry out sharp legislation against the coal trains, like, actually outlawing them. And another thing I will mention about the coal train is that, everybody in Seattle, most people know that coal coming to this region is going to be devastating in terms of climate change. Everybody knows about that climate catastrophe. The one hook that corporations have is that they're supposedly going to create jobs. And the reality is that those jobs are not going to be, overall, we're going to lose jobs. So if you look at the numbers, that doesn't work. But even more so, I think we have to call for sustainable, green, living wage, unionized jobs that come with full benefits and security. We don't need to destroy the environment and get a few crappy jobs in return. What we should fight for is sustainable environment and for good jobs for everyone. And look at what we did the last time. We had less than 1/10 of the budget of CHOP, and we managed to completely shift the political debate. I promise you we will be doing the same thing this time. We will be running a vigorous, sharp, and serious campaign, and I invite you all to join us in making historic change in the city's politics. I invite the press to cover us repeatedly, and I invite the press to host debates between me and the other candidates for the City Council. I invite you to all to volunteer and make financial contributions. We don't take money from corporations. I invite you to look at votesawant.org and at our Facebook page, and I invite you all to join us in carrying out a great campaign.
Thank you, Kshama. So our next speaker is Jav Parrish. Jav endorsed Kshama Sawant's election campaign last year when she ran for the state house position, and he's also supporting her campaign this year, and he'll be speaking today in support of her. Jav is a longtime local progressive activist and media figure. He wrote for both the Stranger newspaper and the Seattle Weekly over about a decade, as well as a number of national news outlets. And during that time, he reported on the historic protests against the World Trade Organization, the summit here in Seattle in 1999. And he also hosts a weekly radio show on KEXP called Mind Over Matters, and he's been hosting that for 17 years now. So thanks a lot, Jav, for coming, sir.
I'll keep this brief since Kshama is the person you want to talk with and ask questions to. As Rami said, I'm proud to support Kshama this year. As somebody who has been a community organizer and an activist and a journalist and media commentator for a long, long time in local politics, I was tremendously impressed by Kshama's run last year for the House seat against Frank Chop. She did a remarkable job. She had an underfunded campaign, a campaign that did not get a lot of media support, and she has, in my estimation, done a better job than any progressive candidate that we've seen in this city in a very long time on the strength of her knowledge, her articulateness, her passion, and almost entirely by word of mouth and her ability to inspire people with her vision. And being a second-time candidate, I'm sure that she'll have learned from her experience last time and do a better job this time. I would gently correct her. It's not about just changing the debate, it's also about winning, and I think you can. I say this knowing Richard Conlin. I like Richard Conlin. I remember when he was first elected 16 years ago, where there was a lot of hope for his tenure on city council. He came out of Yes Magazine and the environmental movement. He said a lot of the right things, and as with many in a long line of socially liberal, business-friendly Democrats who have occupied seats on city council, his walk has not matched his talk, and I'm sure he says many of the right things. He probably personally believes that he's doing many of the right things. He certainly says that publicly. The push at the end, when push comes to shove at the end of the day, what the city council does in this city does not represent the vast majority of people in this city. It's a very homogeneous city council by and large. It's a city council that, for example, just last week, without a whole lot of debate, raised the height limit on buildings in South Lake Union, a neighborhood with lots of property owned by Vulcan and Paul Allen, as she mentioned, to 40 stories, and they did that without having negotiated yet any kind of requirements for developer fees to be set aside to help fund affordable housing, let alone the fact that the city's definition of affordable housing is not, in fact, particularly affordable. And these sorts of policies, day after day, week after week, year after year, is what the City Council in Seattle has been doing for many years that don't represent the interests of the vast majority of the city of Seattle. And we really need on the City Council, certainly in the campaign, but also in the council itself, people who represent a wider spectrum of beliefs and concerns and constituencies in the city, and Kshama can do that. I'm not a socialist. If Kshama and I were each to wave a magic wand and be able to create the best possible world, we probably have some significant differences, but she brings really valuable perspective to this campaign and this debate in a way that, this campaign is not about an ideal world. It's about specific policies enacted by the City Council and the City of Seattle in 2013 and on for the next 4 years. And on that particular level, I think Kshama will make an outstanding City Council candidate and member, and I'm proud to support her, and I wish her all the best of luck.
Thank you, Jav. So, thank you everyone for coming. If we want to, at this point, take any questions from the media, we can do that. Yes?
The Occupy Seattle movement seemed to very much dominate the city's dialogue and debate during the fall, several months of the fall of 2011. There was even a qualified resolution by the City Council endorsing it. Yet essentially, the movement kind of consumed itself. It got into jargon. It made a nuisance of itself and eventually kind of petered out. How do you propose to keep that happening from your campaign and your incumbency should you win?
Well, I think the reality is that times have completely changed, and Occupy has totally shifted the debate to the left in a way that hasn't happened in over 40 years. So if that particular phase of the movement may have petered out, that means nothing in terms of what we're the period that we're about to head into. The period that we're about to head into is going to be a heightened period of political activism by people, and campaigns like this are going to promote those kinds of movements. And I would say that the problem here is not that, oh, you know, we are running and, you know, what is that actually going to do? The problem is that there aren't more left-wing campaigns that you know, that are running just like we are, not only in the city council but in the state and even on the national level. And I think you're going to see more of that, not less. And in fact, if you look at the environmental movements that have been happening in Washington DC and in Canada and so on, and even the mass protests that you saw against the coal trains both in Whatcom County and in Seattle, I think you're going to see more of that. This is just a taste of things to come.
Let me follow up on that. You're talking about campaigns like this are going to promote this kind of movement. Are you also prepared for the, you know, for the normal cut and chaff of Seattle City Council business, of constituents that come to you with chuckles that could be covered as sinkholes if they were in Florida, with generally the day-to-day nitty-gritty detail of public service? Are you going to build a movement, or are you going to actually serve one by one the constituents who elect you?
Well, you know, the question to ask is how much serving of constituents are the city council doing right now? Their constituents are big business. And if you're asking me that am I going to serve those same constituents, the answer is a resounding no. I will not be supporting big business in any way whatsoever.
No, that's not what I was asking.
Let me finish. And the nitty-gritty of the city council, you know, it could involve kissing up to corporations and the billionaires, or it could involve meeting ordinary people, listening to what they need, if they need minimum wage increase, if they need potholes to be fixed, if they need their rents to be lowered. That is what I consider the nitty-gritty of city council, and I will absolutely be engaged. You know, I will be doing that nitty-gritty work because that has to be done, and nobody else is doing it. There is no voice for those kinds of nitty-gritty issues on the city council.
Have you recently been up to the 7th floor of the City Council office?
No.
You go up there. There you have to kind of check in and say who you're going to see and what your business is and this type of thing. There's essentially a door, where in the old City Hall, thank God, torn down for its architecture, there was not. How do I put this? If one of those ordinary people you're just talking to wants to come and see you, would that person have to go through a security door in order to do so? Absolutely
not. And by the way, let me remind you that I am one of those ordinary people. I'm not a big shot like these other council members. And it's going to be very easy for ordinary people to meet me because I am going to be seeking them out, and I'm not going to be sitting in the rarefied halls of the rich and the wealthy. I'm going to be out there on the streets just like I was last year.
To get anything done on the city council, really, you need you need enough votes, you need a majority. So can you talk a little bit about, you're talking a lot about the work that they do up there, and you say they're not doing any work for constituents, and they have such conflicting views with yours. How would you work with them up there to get the minimum wage and these other things that you propose accomplished?
Well, if you look at examples, and I'll give you a very recent example right here in Seattle. If you look at how the paid sick leave initiative was passed, the city council members did not come up with that. The Economic Opportunity Institute, which does fantastic work for coming up with policies that are in the interest of ordinary people, they came up with that. And the only reason it got passed was because rank and file workers in the city marched on the streets and demanded that the city council support it, and that's when a few members of the city council agreed to champion it. So in reality, getting something done in the interest of ordinary working people in Seattle does not involve sitting with them, with the other city council members with whom I have major disagreements, and getting them to agree, but getting a mass movement involved so that the mass movement, which I will be a part of, will put pressure on the establishment to get things done.
So it seems like a couple of the things you want done are kind of statewide. I mean, you have the coal and you have minimum wage. How do you think you accomplish those things as a city council member?
Well, I think, first of all, yes, there are things that we will be bringing up during the campaign, which if you look at the letter of the law involves state legislation, but that is exactly the point of an activist campaign, that if we rely on purely legalistic channels, we don't actually win battles. The ordinary working people win battles. They can make legalistic changes, but that requires a groundswell from the streets. So that is absolutely correct. But if you look at the coal trains, for example, there are several city hubs that the coal trains are, the track is going to flow through. There's Spokane, there's Seattle, there's Bellingham, and so on. Each of these cities could pass a law that outlaws the coal train, no coal train in the city. And if each of these cities did that, where are the coal trains going to go? And Seattle can be the shining beacon that leads the way. But as I said before, that is not going to happen because we're going to have a nice conversation with Richard Conlin or somebody else. That is going to happen if hundreds of thousands of people are out there demanding that the city outlaw it. So I would say that there's a lot that the city can do. There's a lot that the state can do, but nothing is going to get done unless we demand this from them.
So it kind of sounds like your solution to a lot of things is to have a mass movement. Like what about, like Joel Conlin said, like what about the smaller things? Like how do you working with the other council members on those?
But that's my point. I mean, every small thing that you're talking about or every big thing, that does not happen because you have conversations with these people. I mean, let me ask you this. If these people were inclined to agree with our point of view, then these changes would already have happened and I would not need to be running this campaign. I'm not a politician. I have no interest in being a politician. But the reason we are running this campaign is because unless we are there, unless activists are raising these issues never get raised. And in example after example, in recent or old history, what you see is that all progressive change has come from people demanding that change, and that demand comes in the form of mass movements.
We can take one more question.
Last fall, you raised the idea of a slate of independent left-wing candidates running in the city council and mayoral races. Are you still advocating that?
We're still advocating that. We want anybody who wants to run independent of the Democratic Party establishment and advance the interests of ordinary working people. We invite them to join us because in reality this is the only thing that is going to change. I mean, I want to say at this point that a lot of people think that we should just we should be the left wing of the Democratic Party, and there are well-meaning people, but unfortunately any well-meaning agenda gets swallowed up in the real agenda of the Democratic Party elite, which is severely skewed towards big business. So if people are out there who want to actually make positive change for ordinary people in Seattle, we invite them to join us.
Okay. Thanks again. If anyone's interested, please go to votesawant.org if you would like to get involved and help our campaign. We need donations, we need volunteers, we need activists, we need people to join Social Alternative. So again, that's votesawant.org, VOTESAWANT.org. You can donate there. You can sign up to help out. We definitely need as many people as possible. Thank you.